Jared Butler is not one of the flashiest names in the 2021 NBA draft, but he is definitely someone that you should know. This is Floor and Ceiling. Let's break him down. Jared Butler may be one of the most underrated prospects in the 2021 NBA draft with his three-point shooting and mature decision-making. Butler enjoyed a highly productive junior season at Baylor, and despite having wrapped up his third year in college, he is still very young. Butler will only turn 21 in August, and he should have NBA teams very interested after putting up quality numbers across the board. At 6'3", 195 pounds with a 6'4" wingspan, Butler can play both backcourt positions. And in my eyes, he will be a big steal for whichever team picks him come July 29th. Let's start with what I believe will be Jared Butler's calling card early in his NBA career, his three-point shooting. Butler should be recognized as one of this draft's premier outside shooters in the same lines as someone like Corey Kispert. The Baylor guard was on fire from beyond the arc all season long in multiple ways. He profiles as someone who will be very comfortable spotting up or catching and shooting from the perimeter with a quick, fluid release. Butler made about 42% of his threes while taking over 6 per game. This is not a case like teammate Davion Mitchell either, where he only had great numbers this season. In his first 2 years at Baylor, Butler made an okay 35% and then a fairly good 38% from 3, always on high volume. Crucially, Butler is not just limited to standing around and being dependent on others. Butler showed glimpses at Baylor of being a capable pull-up shooter from 3. He can get into a shot out of hang dribbles or sidesteps, rising on balance the same way he does when he is spotting up. This is important for Butler's upside. Despite not being a flashy player at all, he can still create for himself and get his own bucket. Baylor's game against Kansas is a great example of what Butler can do when he heats up. Against the Jayhawks, he made difficult shots look routine. Butler was pulling up from deep out of ball screens with ease and swishing some high difficulty three-pointers. But even if Butler is not always making it rain out of pick and rolls, I am a believer in the diversity of his shot. Sure, 70% of Butler's threes were assisted, but I think some context is needed. There were times where he was spotting up, but what about all the times he was running into these triples and then making them? Butler can hit off-movement threes with crisp, repeatable mechanics, especially in his upper body. He sprints from one side of the court to the other and then rises into the tray quickly and on balance. This is very hard to do, so the fact that Butler can already do this early in his career is encouraging. Given that he can spot up, catch and shoot, create his own pull-up, and run into threes, I think that Butler's shot is legit. He has the shot variety, the good percentages from both the three-point line and the free throw line, and the mechanics. I see little reason as to why his three-pointer will not translate to an NBA setting. Obviously, making threes is a highly coveted skill in today's NBA, but if a player is limited to just that, then he can still get played off the floor. We are currently seeing this in the playoffs, because besides being able to hit threes, you have to be able to do something else. Luckily for Butler, this is not an issue. Butler is very capable of attracting the opposing defense's attention with his three-point shooting, and then successfully attacking closeouts. He is not one to blow past his defender and come up with some crazy dunk, but Butler is always under control, secure with the ball, and calm with his decisions. If you run Butler off the three-point line, he can put the ball on the floor and make a play. Everything I just said about the way Butler attacks closeouts applies to his driving game. He is not jaw-dropping, but he is effective. Butler is not blessed with an incredible first step or outstanding vertical pop, as I will get into later. However, that is not a necessity when you are as cool as a cucumber. Butler rarely gets sped up or stressed out. He knows that he cannot get by on pure athleticism, so instead, it is all about the fundamentals. Butler times his drives correctly, has a tight handle close to his body, and does not settle for wild, low-efficiency shots at the rim. Watch here against West Virginia. Butler's first drive gets cut off, but he remains patient to reset the play, figure out the correct angle, and then finish off the glass for the and one. Or here against Texas, Butler isos against the much more athletic Greg Brown, but he gains the upper hand with his patience. Butler gets Brown on the up fake and then finishes calmly. What Butler lacks in burst, he makes up in other areas, like strength and poise. Simply put, he knows how to get to his spots, and then he knows what to do once he gets there. Butler is a strong 195 pounds, and he can leverage that weight. He pushes his way into the paint, can finish through contact, and is hard to knock off balance. On top of that, I think that the right word to describe Butler's driving game might be deceptive. He is hard to figure out because he is both shifty and crafty. Butler can handle from side to side before breaking out a spin move to get to the rim, for instance. This happens here. It seems like he is going left, but then he makes a hard turn on the hezzy and lays the ball up and in. However, it is also true that Butler's driving game comes with his biggest weakness. I think that Butler has the brain and the shot of an NBA player for sure. The biggest question mark, like I have hinted at, is his athleticism. Butler is a limited athlete who is not as dynamic as, for example, Davion Mitchell. Mitchell's three-point shot might be more of an unknown quantity, but it is easier to imagine him getting into the lanes and driving in an NBA setting, for instance. Meanwhile, Butler can sometimes really struggle to get downhill. He can overcome this at times with the craft that we just saw, finishing an okay but not great 62% of the time at the rim. However, there are also plenty of examples of him not being able to turn the corner or get all the way to the basket. If he found it easier in this department, then I think the consensus on him would be totally different. For example, against Oklahoma State, Butler finds it hard to create separation on the drive, ends up stepping out of bounds, and turns the ball over. Finally, against West Virginia, Butler tries to bully his way to the rim. However, he gets caught between two defenders, and as you can see, it is not a great possession. One byproduct of Butler's lack of burst is that he can sometimes be called for unprovoked offensive fouls. Like I said, Butler can have a tough time getting all the way to the rack, so he will occasionally get caught pushing off on his man. I am curious to see how this driving game will pan out in the NBA. On one hand, he will have more space available, but on the other, he will also be up against elite athletes most of the time, and Butler already had his difficulties driving in college. However, I am optimistic that Butler will be able to offset some of his half-court deficiencies through his passing. Butler is a smart and unselfish playmaker whose creation skills, in my opinion, go a bit under the radar. He averaged about 5 assists per game in his junior season at Baylor, all the while being second on his team in assist percentage. Butler has improved as a facilitator every year while also becoming more important to Baylor every year. His assists have gradually increased, while his turnovers, for the most part, really haven't. For instance, Butler had 59 more assists than turnovers this season, despite having the highest usage rate on his team. What I like about Butler's passing is that he is able to hit the most important passes in an NBA environment. By that, I mean that he can find lobs for his bigs and generate quality three-point looks for his shooters. Like most of his game, Butler is not one for showtime, but he is measured and calm. He can toss passes through tight windows and does not usually telegraph his intentions. Another thing that's important, Butler can operate in the pick and roll. This is crucial because it will play a big part in determining what Butler's role at the next level will be. At Baylor, he was more of an on-ball guard, but Davion Mitchell also took control plenty of the time. In the NBA, it remains to be seen whether Butler is more of a 1 or a 2, but I think that he can definitely run the point. For one, he is unlikely to play with another undersized score-first guard in the mold of Mitchell, and beyond that, Butler has the intelligence to handle plenty of duties on the ball. Like I mentioned with his half-court passing as a whole, I am pretty optimistic about where Butler stands as a facilitator. He is a mature and composed decision maker that can play out of ball screens and make life easier for his teammates. Either he can find the screener on the roll, usually for a lob, or he can scan the floor before picking out a pass to someone else. This is usually either to a shooter on the wings or a teammate along the baseline. All in all, Butler generally makes the type of reads that you want from an NBA point guard, but I expect his role to shift slightly from Baylor to the NBA team that picks him. Because if Butler is going to be a full-time point guard in the NBA, there are still a few improvement areas that will be important for him. The first one that stood out to me is as a ball handler in the pick and roll. Butler is not necessarily bad, but he still has room to grow here in order to be safer with the ball at all times. I think that he might suffer a little bit at first in an even more ball-heavy role. This is uncharacteristic of his general play, but Butler can get a little bit sped up when he consistently has to make decisions in the pick and roll. Usually, this comes in the form of being a little bit too overzealous with his ball handling. Butler is not the most creative with his handle, so he can spill the ball if he's trying to do too much, such as splitting a screen. In my view, he still has to get better at dealing with ball pressure, because right now he is at his best when he makes quick decisions, be it trying to score himself or create for others. Something else that Butler can continue to get better at is his passing. Generally speaking, I am not overly concerned because he mostly makes the right reads. However, there are definitely times where he is a little bit too loose with the ball. Butler can still improve at putting more weight or zip on his passes so that they do not get picked off or deflected. On defense, Jared Butler is mostly positive. Again, it's all about the fundamentals. He knows where to be and how to place himself to make things hard for the attacker. Butler is a capable one-on-one defender, although I think he is limited in a positional sense. He will probably only be able to defend guards, but still he had some pretty impressive sequences over the course of the year. Here against West Virginia, Butler picks up easily on the switch, stays in front of his man, and ends up getting the block. Or against Texas Tech, Butler again stays in front of the play, flipping his hips all the way, and then forces a difficult shot with a contest. Overall, Butler is a solid defender on the ball who can move backwards and sideways. And of course, it also helps that he plays with great effort. You can count on Butler to make a few defensive plays per game that create something out of nothing. He is very giving on this end of the floor, always staying engaged and never really neglecting his defensive responsibilities. Watch these clips as Butler gets back into plays that are seemingly gone and comes up with the steal to avoid a clear transition opportunity. Or here against Oklahoma State as he works hard to front the post and gets the ball back for Baylor. Butler is also solid defensively off the ball, where I really like his anticipation. For instance, he can come over from the help side to snatch the ball away or put a dent in the opposition's plans. He can also be active in the passing lanes, recognizing loose balls and pouncing on them to get the steal. Watch here against Auburn as Butler anticipates Sharif Cooper's pass and then takes it down the other end to score. Lastly, he also has some upside as a team defender. He has a knack for making solid rotations, although I think that he might still be a little better on the ball right now. Still, Butler can rotate and take charges such as here, or make a difference by being in the right place at the right time. Here against Iowa State, Butler does not necessarily get the stop, but he rotates and puts the big off long enough for Baylor to end up with the block. The biggest weakness for Butler on the defensive side of the basketball goes back to his athleticism. Butler is not exactly small at 6'3" for a guard, but he is not long or athletic. That can pose some problems on the defensive end, because Butler has limitations that he simply cannot overcome, regardless of how hard he works. At times, Butler is not quick or big enough to keep up with his attacker. He lacks elite foot speed, and although he competes hard to make up for that, he can definitely get caught trailing or be overwhelmed by size. This is definitely something to keep an eye on as he enters the NBA and has to face off against bigger and better athletes. So I think that Jared Butler is one of the more underrated prospects in the 2021 NBA draft. Like I said, he has the three-point shooting, he has the ability to attack closeouts, he is a smart driver who uses his functional strength to get to his spots, but I think the main question mark that I have with him, like I mentioned in the video, is his athleticism. Now, Butler is not a terrible athlete. Like I said, he can move backwards, he can move sideways on defense, obviously he can get to his spots on attack. But I do think that there are many instances where he does have that lack of ability to turn the corner or get all the way to the rim. I think he already struggled with that at times in college, so I am a little bit worried about how he will do in the NBA against bigger and better athletes all the time. Regardless of that, I do think that Butler is being underrated. He pretty much has everything that you are looking for in a prospect. 40+% three-point shooting, the ability to attack closeouts, a smart defender, team-first player. So for me, I would feel very comfortable picking him as high as probably number 15 or around that area. All the talk about him being a late first round guy or even an early second round, in my opinion, is underrating him. As always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, make sure to leave a comment telling me what you think of Jared Butler, and if you enjoy the channel, make sure to subscribe. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time.